So, like I was saying, right, Mill was worried about the tyranny of this larger or louder part over the rest, right, in even a democratic system, right? So what he needs is a line in the sand, right, that prohibits individuals from being tyrannized over by the collective, right? Liberty originally as a concept was introduced to limit the powers of the aristocracy over the common individual citizen, serf, subject, right? Liberty was interesting because it provided some sort of minimal defense against the abuse of power over individuals by their minority aristocracies. But Mill wants to point out that even in a case of a democracy, we can still have a tyranny, and tyranny is a problem, plain and simple. Right? The question still remains, where do we draw the line between the collective and its power over the individual? Well, Mill claims on page 9 of your On Liberty, this book, right, that the object of this essay I'm quoting here, the object of this essay is to assert one very simple principle as entitled to govern absolutely in the dealings of society with the individual in the way of compulsion and control, whether the means be used be physical force in the form of legal penalties or the moral coercion of public opinion. That principle is the sole end for which mankind are warranted, individually or collectively, in interfering with the liberty of any action of any action of any of their number is self-protection. That the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. It's important, so I'll quote it again. That the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. So here we get Mill's principle of harm. The only reason that I can persuade you morally, socially, or even physically to do anything, the only reason, right, would be to prevent harm, right? So, for example, if you are driving recklessly and speeding, right, why are there speed limits? Why are there road rules? Right? To prevent harm to others, right? So, the government, right, and in more general terms, the collective can prohibit the action of an individual member if it is going to potentially cause harm to others. Right? Now, all other moral questions, Mill kicks over to the principle of utility on 10, where he claims, I regard utility as the ultimate appeal on all ethical questions, but it must be utility in the largest sense, grounded on the permanent interests of man as a progressive being. So, based on this simple principle, the only right of the state or any of its parts over the individual resides in the protection of the whole from harm caused by individuals. So, nobody hurt anyone. But what exactly constitutes harm? Right? Well, there are certain obvious kinds of harm, right? Punching, kicking, shooting, running over, setting fire to, that sort of thing, that are going to clearly be right out for Mill. But in addition to this specific sort of harm, Mill wants to lay out what he calls 3 essential human liberties, violations of which also constitute harm for Mill. Right? And he does this on page 11 over to 12. Right? The first is the inward domain of consciousness. We have we have freedom of opinion and sentiment on all subjects, practical or speculative, scientific, moral, or theological. This extends to publicly arguing and publishing these opinions. Now, this falls under the liberty of thought discussion, and if you felt like going through this book, you'll find chapters devoted to each and every one of these essential human liberties. But what does he mean by this inward domain of consciousness? We can think and argue whatever we want, even if other people think it's stupid. Right? So what Mill's saying here is that I could become a card-carrying member of the Flat Earth Society. It's a society of people who believe that all of the pictures taken from space of the Earth are fake, right? And this supposed globe that we're living on is actually flat, right? It looks more like the map of the world hanging in the UN, right? And I'm allowed to think that if I want, right? Now, what Mill wants to argue with regard to that is, well, he's got good utilitarian reasons, right? If people think ideas are stupid and silence them simply because they think they're stupid, or wrong, or incorrect, we wind up with problems. Think of Galileo, silenced because he had a stupid idea. Right? But the majority can be wrong. Right? The polling function on who wants to be a millionaire aside, the majority can be incorrect and a minority can be correct. Right? So to compel to silence any member of a civilized community simply because you think they're wrong, well, what that does is stunts what Mill will later call our dialectical ability to attain a comprehension of truth, and it assumes us to be infallible. We think we know it all when we compel somebody to silence simply because we think they're wrong or stupid or what have you. There's no good reason to compel somebody to silence. Right. So, secondly, the liberty of tastes and pursuits of framing the life plan of our life to suit our character. We can do, in million terms, whatever we want in terms of our livelihood, our lifestyle, etc., even if others think it's stupid, foolish, wrong-headed, etc., just so long as we don't hurt anyone. So, contract killer, mafia enforcer, straight out. Drunk driver, straight out. Right? But mime. Are you hurting anyone? No. Right? Clown. Are you hurting anyone? No. And the example I usually use, in my mother's household, philosophy is an Irish curse. She spits out the word philosophy. Right? But Mill, in his On Liberty, defends my liberty of tastes and pursuits of framing my life plan to suit our character, right? And claims that we can do whatever we want, whatever suits us, just so long as we don't hurt anyone, right? In terms of our lifestyle, our livelihood, and that sort of thing. And this particular essential human liberty that Mill argues for is one that's often picked up by gay and lesbian rights activists, right? They can do whatever they like in terms of their lifestyle. So we'll return to that in just a second. Finally, combination among individuals. We can meet and associate with one another for any purpose, just so long as it doesn't involve harm to others or forcing people not of full age to participate or be deceived. Now, this involves dating, having friends, staging peaceful protests, rallies, discussion groups, or just going for a drink. Right. So each of these three essential human liberties, Mill wants to argue there is a certain utilitarian value to the defense of these liberties. It helps a just society. And he concludes by saying on page 12, no society in which these liberties are not, on the whole, respected is free, whatever may be its form of government, and none is completely free in which they do not exist absolute and unqualified. The only freedom which deserves the name is that of pursuing our own good in our own way, so long as we do not attempt to deprive others of theirs or impede their efforts to obtain it. Each is the own proper guardian of his own health, whether bodily, mental, and spiritual. Mankind are greater gainers by suffering each other live as seems good to themselves than by compelling each to live as seems good to the rest. So in a nutshell, violation of each of these liberties constitutes harm. Thank you.